will shortly be the new host of GBH News Rooted, which is Basic Black Reinvented. Paris is a graduate of UNC Chapel Hill, and she recently earned her Social Impact MBA at BU. So I'm going to address first Paris on this and then introduce Naisha into the conversation. So how do you feel, Paris, about taking over this pivotal role at a time which is quite turbulent for all sorts of people in this country's history?
That's how I feel. I feel like every single day is a series of just deep breaths right now, because so much is going on and there's so much to decipher, and it's a time when information is really, really critical for people wherever they may be. With Rooted, we have the luxury of being able to distribute our content on YouTube and soon to, on television on Channel 2. And on 89.7 on the radio, and to get that information out to many people. I worry a lot about, how long it will be before our ability to disseminate information will be challenged, especially given who I am and the content, the subject matter of our show focusing primarily on critical issues in Black communities. But I also feel very divinely called to be doing this right now. I grew up in North Carolina, went to UNC. I am the proud descendant of people who were enslaved, and I really feel a true, deep commitment to doing this work without fear, right? But that doesn't mean that it doesn't keep me up at night. That doesn't mean that it doesn't give me anxiety. That doesn't mean that I'm not scared sometimes. But sometimes you got to do it scared, right? Because you know it's the right thing. And it can be exciting. We're really committed to having fun. I was telling you and Denise earlier, my number one principle in life is fun. And so we really pride ourselves on not only talking about the issues of the day, but bringing joy to the table as well.
So you're young, gifted, and Black.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Always.
So what do you hope to bring to this fresh dialogue?
Yeah.
Chapter.
Absolutely. So another thing that's really important for me is accessibility, right? Is making it, I come from a long line of people who are on all walks of life, right? Everyone from educators and healthcare providers to convicted felons, and to people who have have faced various struggles in their lives, to people who struggle with addiction, et cetera. And so at any given time, I'm imagining, most of the time, my family, right? And if I were having conversations with them about the things that we discuss on Rooted or on GBH News, how would I have those conversations with them? And really getting eye level and really bringing my full self to the table. I know Elsa Gomes Bimbo is somewhere she's over there, and I remember the first time I met her was at a GBH event, and she noted to me she was like, "You're very real on the radio," and I'm like, yeah, because we're dealing with some real SHIT, right? And so you gotta be real in times like this, but it's also about just making yourself relatable. And I think it's so tempting when you have a platform like the one we have at GBH is to make it very, very suited and high level intellect. And that's important because we can do that, right? And we are all able to communicate at that level. And it's also about bringing people in who maybe have not always been welcome into those spaces. And so I'm really looking to have conversations that speak to people at all different types of life experiences, and also to just try new things and to push the envelope.
So that brings me to this topic that we're on today, which is that you and Naisha, who connected, you can tell us about Howard University connection there, you came up with this Waking Up Well idea.
Yes, so I've known Naisha, I don't even know how long now. It feels like
2 years? 3 years?
A few years. And we have a mutual friend and just champion, Lee Hill, who is the executive editor at GBH News, a Howard alum, along with Naisha. And so Leah and I had been talking about mental health because we both understand, like, when you work in a newsroom, that's something that often goes overlooked because you're just kind of expected to, you know, put that aside and do the work. But he was telling me how a station he had worked at previously, they used to have like a meditation minute every morning. And I said, okay, so how can we do this on the radio? And it wasn't initially widely received. I think there was some confusion among people about, like, well, how exactly would we have therapy on the radio? Like, what exactly is this? But Leah and I remained committed to this idea, and also had talked numerous times about pulling Naisha as the founder of Pure Spark into the fold. And so I reached out to her and said, hey, I really want to do this. Like, let's do a full year and just start there. We can pick a topic each month. She and I got together and brainstormed about the different topics and different people we could bring in to talk about everything from single awareness during the month of February when everyone is talking about Valentine's Day, to money matters in March, to the mental health of mothers and fathers, to dealing with mental health going back to school for young people, and all different other kinds of subjects. And we had a great time with this series. We had a lot of cool people, and I would like to think that we really reached a lot of people. One of the first things Naisha said, and because we had her on to introduce the series, was that it's so important for organizations like news outlets to highlight these things, right? And Mary, we were talking earlier about how it's, you know, you get all the news in the morning and it's a priority for people to get their news. Let's also make it a priority for people to take care of their mental health.
Amen to that. Okay, so Naisha, you're the CEO of Pure Spark and the founder. Tell me a little bit about how that whole thing came together over time.
I always try to figure out how far back to go with my stories because I feel like I could go all the way back or I could go some of the way back. But I feel like we got a little bit of time, so I'll take my time with sharing my story. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me into this space. This place is beautiful. And thank you all for coming out on a Tuesday morning to hear what we have to say. I really do appreciate it. So I am from Boston, right over the bridge, born and raised, but my parents decided at a very young age that they would place me in MECO. Has anyone heard of MECO?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, wow, I'm surprised a lot of y'all heard of MECO. It's a Boston thing. No? Okay, I guess so, you know, it spreads. But, you know, MECO was created to help to desegregate schools, and it still exists to this day, which, you know, I won't go into that. But me and my two sisters all went through Sharon Public Schools. And so I grew up oftentimes being the only Black child in the classroom, which is, you know, very interesting for a 6-year-old when people are asking you about, you know, where you're coming from and who you are and can I touch your hair and all this other stuff. Never had a teacher that looked like me. At all, from first grade to 12th grade. So you can kind of maybe imagine what I was dealing with when it came to racial identity, cultural identity, right? Totally different than the way Paris, I'm sure you grew up, right? And the things that you learned. And so I decided that I would go to an HBCU, a historically Black college university. I went to Howard University. Anybody heard of Howard? Yeah, okay. And at Howard, I had a chance to finally have my first Black teacher. Wow, finally, not being the only Black child in the classroom. Feeling like I belonged, feeling like I was loved, learning about things like the Tulsa massacre. Like, what? How come I never learned about this? Like, just feeling like, finally, I am being connected to my history, to my culture, to my people. And then it was time to leave and to go into corporate America. So I graduated Howard at the time that the Enron Anderson scandal had happened. And Sarbanes-Oxley had came out with all these new pronouncements and laws and regulations, and there was so much work for accountants, which was good for somebody leaving college. You wouldn't have a job, right? You know, you went there so you could get educated, so that you could go to the workforce, so that you can make money and live the American dream. And I was ready to do that. My, you know, family, everybody was so proud. Yeah, Naisha, you know, you're gonna have this great job. And I went in there and I felt like that 6-year-old child again. Where are the people? Okay. all right, I know how to code switch. I know how to just push through and get things done. Like, I'll just go back to those things that I used to do, right? I'll be fine. And it was hard. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll just leave. I started my career off at Deloitte & Touche, and I was like, well, maybe this place is just too competitive. Maybe I need to leave this place. I'll go to someplace else. So I went to Fidelity. And then I still felt the same way. I said, okay, well, maybe I just need to go back to DC. Maybe that's it. In DC, it was a little bit better. And then, you know, there were just things that you kept dealing with. You know, obviously I'm really tall. I'm 6'2". And people assume certain things about me because I'm a taller person, a Black woman. And so there were things that were said and not said. And the weight of everything, the compounded weight, I should say, from being that 6-year-old child up into being about 35 years old and not ever expressing the things that I felt, finally exploded. It finally took its toll. And, you know, I went through a mental turmoil. You know, I showed all of the signs of clinical depression, and I thought that I could like will my way out of it, right? Like, okay, well, I just need to like work harder, you know, like that was the answer to everything back in the day. I'm just not working hard enough. And I just need to force myself to change these feelings and emotions. Like, you know, fake it till you make it kind of thing that people say all the time. Yeah, I was like trying to do that. And it only made things worse. My depression just got worse and worse, and I developed what they called catatonia, which is where you completely detach from reality. It's a trauma response. It's a way that the mind is trying to protect you from the life that you're living that's too traumatic. And so eventually, this is December of 2017, I got to a point where I said, you know what, it's not worth it anymore. I'm in too much pain. This is it. And, you know, I love that the church ladies were here, and I love that song that she was singing, because there were a lot of people, a lot of friends, family, church members that prayed for me. And I know that their prayers helped me to get to the point where I am today. I think their prayers are still carrying me to do this work. But anyway, I, you know, was institutionalized and went through a lot of stuff dealing with that. But finally got to this point where I felt grounded. I had, you know, packed up my apartment in DC, moved to Connecticut short term, and then eventually moved to Boston. And I lose my 4th family member to suicide. And at that point, you know, I was angry. I couldn't be angry at my cousin. But, you know, I think sometimes we think about anger as like this feeling or emotion that you don't want to feel, but actually it could propel you to do something. And so I decided that I was gonna speak up, because before that I didn't really tell a lot of people, but I said I'm going to be very loud about what happened to me in hopes that I can help somebody. And so I started with just sharing my story. I shared it with McLean Hospital in Belmont, a place where a family member of mine received services from. You know, one of the largest and greatest mental health hospitals in the country, if not the world. And they were doing a campaign on trying to remove the stigma in the Black community. And I shared my story with them, and then shared it on social media, which I was like, oh gosh, this is it. There's no turning back now. Once the story is out there, it's out there, you know? And I knew that it would be life altering. You know, at the time, I wasn't dating anybody. I'm like, oh, no one's gonna wanna date me now. You know, it's over. I hadn't made the final choice to leave corporate America. I was like, oh, no one's ever gonna hire me. But dang, something's still telling me to do it. You know, the idea of doing it scared, because you know there's a greater purpose. There's like a greater reason to do it. So even with those things that I was gonna face, I didn't know what it was gonna be until I did it anyway.
So how did you segue a condition and a need into a business?
Gosh, I'm still trying to figure that out. Well, I think that my background is in business, which helps a little bit, but not that much because I was a bean counter, you know, I was an accountant, you know what I mean? So I understood and still do understand the you know, the debits and credits and, you know, profits and losses and all that stuff. But there's a lot of other stuff that goes into business. So, you know, with sharing that information online, there was a lot of people that were in my DMs that were like, oh my gosh, like, Naisha, what? How come you didn't ask me for help? I could have helped you. Or, you know, people that I thought had it all together, like, you know, lawyers and, you know, other fellow professionals that were like, yep, I just got out of the hospital too, or like, you're so brave. And then people started asking me questions. So I knew that I had an audience, right? I knew that there were people from my community that wanted to learn more, that wanted to understand how I got to the point that I was at, where I was okay. Because a lot of people don't make it out of catatonia. Catatonia, like, I want y'all to Google what that is. Because I can't really put it to words in such a short amount of time, but it's serious. And so I wanted to start to share that. And so I will never forget when COVID happened, because COVID and I have the same anniversary. It's 5 years for us. I know, isn't that weird to be connected that way? And so I started in March of 2020, just hosting like virtual gatherings where I was trying to educate my community on what's the difference between a therapist and a life coach, because a lot of people were thinking it's the same thing, and I was like, honey, no, it's not. It's different. Those are two different things. They're great, but you should know how one will help you versus the other. And helping community members learn about the symptoms, like what are the warning signs, lack of sleep or sleeping too much, not being able to not having an appetite or eating too much. Like, these are all warning signs when they're pervasive and they're occurring all the time, that like you probably need to talk to somebody. So I wanted to start to get that information out as quickly and as easy as possible. And then those people that joined us on those Zoom calls actually became people that were added to our wellness directory. So a year later, we created a wellness directory where the business model for that is that providers pay, either a monthly rate, or an annual rate to be listed on our wellness directory.
And who are the providers?
And so a part of my wellness journey is that I use both Western and Eastern methodologies to help me along on my journey. It was actually my therapist, who said, hey, have you ever thought of yoga? And I said, well, what the devil, what does downward dog and depression got to do with each other? Except they both have the same first letter. Like, what? I don't understand. But I said, okay, you're the professional. I'm going to do whatever you tell, because I just want to get better at the end of the day. So if she would have told me to hop on one foot and eat peanut butter, I was going to do it if it meant that I was going to feel better. Like, I was that desperate. And so I went, and I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. There's something to this. And the feeling that I was feeling is something that, people in the wellness world call like somatic healing, right? Mm-hmm. And it's the belief and the thought that there's a lot of trauma and things that are stored in the body. And a lot of times the only way to get it out is through movement. And so I think about the church, right? And I think about the things that we did kind of naturally in the church that's scientifically proven to help you with emotional well-being, praise dances, clapping and singing, all these things that some people might look at and be like, oh, that's a little strange, but they actually help, right? Mm-hmm. And so I had to get a doctor to tell me to move my body, to help me with my mental health. And so I say that because Pure Spark kind of tries to merge the two worlds, and you're starting to see this now in hospitals. My sister works in the ICU at the Brigham, and she even says they'll use Reiki as a way to help patients with their pain. And so we bring together practitioners from both the Western and the Eastern worlds. And so there's therapists, psychologists, doulas, nutritionists, all those types of folks that are listed on our wellness directory. And from there, when the world started opening up, we started hosting wellness events in person so that people had a chance to meet some of these folks that were listed on our wellness directory, because I felt like, we need to do more. I'm always, and that's probably what got me into the work that I did and wanting to be this overachiever was like, I need to do more. I need to do more. This is not enough. This is never enough.
And you do still do some free events. You've got one coming up at the Museum of Science.
Yes, and you're all invited. Next week, Thursday, 6:30, we are going to be at the Museum of Science, opening up with an amazing panel discussion with another person from GBH. And then we have a DJ, we have a wellness expo with a lot of these great practitioners, and we have some food, so feel free to come out and join us.
So I'm just going to ask, how much more time do we have to these?
You have, another 10 minutes.
All right, great. Okay, I don't want to keep talking and find the place is empty. Okay, so we equate wellness with, particularly men, with this machismo thing. Go to the gym, pump iron. Why is it we devote so little attention, 5 minutes a day, to meditation or contemplation, whatever it is, unwinding? Is this a problem that you see as gender-based? Is it particularly prevalent in men don't have time for it, or women are scared to ask for it? I mean...
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're asking the question, like, why are we in the situation that we're in when it comes to mental health in this country overall? And I think there's so many factors. I think we were talking about it before and talking about we don't have a lot of third spaces anymore, COVID and the isolation and us trying to get back to like community. And it's so nice to have spaces like this where we can start to do that. And we need more of that. But then also we're looking at our economy and how, everything's going up. How much does a dozen of eggs cost? I don't know. Like, I don't even know if I can afford them anymore. Cost of living and the fact that, people are just working so hard, and we oftentimes put ourselves last on the list because we're just trying to survive. Some people are maybe parents and they have children, and we just never think that we are important enough to prioritize, and that everybody else, especially as women, I think. I don't know how many other people feel this way. But yeah, you do too? Okay, I just need to hear the affirmation, the snap. Thank you. That we put ourselves kind of last on the list, which is horrible, because a lot of that stuff manifests not only mentally, but physically and spiritually. And then you go outside and people are honking their horns all wild. And you're like, what's wrong with them? And you're going into work and the person that your boss is like treating you like crap. And then you take that home and then it's like a whole, right? But if we could just focus on ourselves and take whatever time that we have to pour into ourselves so that we can pour into others, then we can be better off. But trying to do that is hard, especially when you have women in your family and generations that never did that. They're gonna start looking at you like, what's wrong with her? She doing self-care? Let me tell you, I buy so many self-care things, and I'm always like doing, and my family is just like, how much self-care can you do? I'm like, listen, it's never enough. Yeah. So
I think you raised an interesting point there about all of us in our families. We were talking about our own backgrounds. You don't have to look too far to have had the experience of someone who had bipolar, schizophrenia, or long-term depression that they masked with drinking. This was the accepted way of treating yourself. Do you think that women, we know that women put themselves last, but black women's health in particular gets the least resources? Is this an even greater problem, you think, in the black community? You don't like to complain at church and just put on the brave face?
I think, there's this image, right? We talk about machismo, but then for women too, being strong and being the matriarch, and there's some kind of pride that does come along with like people depending on you and needing you. And there's this feeling of like self-worth. I'm trying to think of the story, and I can't even think of it, but it's about a black man who like races a train, and he wins, but then at the end he dies. And John Henry, yeah, John Henryism. And I mean, that's specifically around black men, but I also feel like that applies to black women too, is that like, you know, you're just like pushing yourself to doing something because one, you're trying to combat society and what society is saying about you, and you want to prove them wrong. And I definitely feel a sense of that a lot in myself. And then you do it to the point where you become ill and you become sick. But again, there's not a lot of examples in our past, necessarily in our recent past, of people doing otherwise. I was even talking to a friend about leisure and how that's so new for us. You know what I mean? To take a vacation and to, you know, that wasn't really things that we used to do. And so I think it's uncomfortable, you know, because it's new. Anything that's new is uncomfortable and trying to get your footing. But it's something that we need to do in order to stay well and be well, and so that we could fight against all the stuff that's happening.
I will just add, because in meeting Naisha, I've been revisiting, I don't know if I ever actually shared this with you, I think I may have, but I have a brother who has had a lot of mental health struggles, particularly with schizophrenia, and when this happened my senior year of high school, when he got diagnosed. I also had my oldest brother, he came out as gay, and it was just a really rough time for my family, and I distinctly remember my mom was the one, right, primarily who was doing all the resource finding, all of like just trying to mend every part of this, and I watched her literally like falling to her knees, going through her own mental health struggles that she was able to get help for, but it just wasn't, it's like, it showed so much of that was being dealt with in the shadows. And even I too, right? Because I was close to both my brothers. The oldest one wasn't. He had, you know, gone on to college, graduated, and left. But the middle one ended up having to come home from school because of what he was going through. And it just like, as someone who was like one of my best friends, right, really morphed over time, and you had to kind of be there for him through that change, and he's doing very well now, but it's a continuous thing where, number one, like I always struggle with how much of his story to tell, even though it affected me, right? It's not my story. And so there's that part of it, but then also recognizing that there still were things that I was witnessing at a very young age, that I was trying to figure out, okay, like where am I? I'm trying to graduate high school, trying to get into college, whatever, and having to sort of not put an extra burden on my parents, and really just saying, well, you know, I can deal with all of my stuff on my own, and I don't have to ask them for much, but recognizing the long-term toll that can take on someone.
Mm-hmm. I also think you raise an interesting point, which is the cost of the mental health issue on everybody in the system, in the family system and structure, and how important it is to try and get help and not ignore those lurking warning signs, and then you have a disaster which is often irreparable. You mentioned someone signing up, I think, for a course. It's very tragic.
Yeah, so you know, I told you we host a lot of events, and some of those events are like pretty popular. We do like a wellness walk in Blue Hills, and so the wellness walk, we have providers that come out, and so we'll have like sound healers and yoga teachers and, you know, therapists, and then we walk through Blue Hills, which is beautiful, by the way. You should check it out if you haven't been up there. And people often say like, oh, I feel like I went on like a little getaway, like, you know, and it's maybe like an hour and a half from like beginning to end. And so as a Black mental health organization, I connect and know of like so many different national Black mental health organizations. There's a big one out in California called BEAM, and me and the founder are pretty close, and I got a text message from him on Tuesday. He said, hey, Naisha, like, I need crisis intervention support. There's a family in Boston that reached out to me, and you know, I want crisis intervention, but ones that don't involve the police, because we know, and this was particularly a young black man, and so we know the things that happen sometimes when we involve the police and mental health and Black men. And so I sent him some resources, and you know, he said, oh, thanks. I ended up finding somebody. I'm all set. Okay, whatever. And then on Thursday morning, my sister calls me. And so I'm kind of working on some stuff, and I pick up the phone. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And she's like, hey, do you remember? She names the person. I said, I don't know if I remember. She said, I met her at, some of your events. She used to always come to your events. And then I met her husband. He's a run coach and, all this other stuff. And I said, I don't know. Her name rings a bell, but like, I can't think of her face and, stuff like that. And she said, well, sis, I want to let you know that she was murdered by her son last night. And I'm in shock. And the son had a mental health issue. And so I'm just like, whoa, okay. And so, she had to get off the phone. And so I continue working, and, I'm sending stuff to the museum. We had an Eventbrite kind of going on, and people registered via Eventbrite, but we had to shut it down, and then the museum started doing their registration on their website. And I open up the Excel, and her name's the third name on the list. The third name, meaning like you were one of the first people to sign up. And I lost it. I lost it. I couldn't even delete her name. I'm leaving her name on the list, and I'm just gonna send it. And I'm just like, what do I do? I don't know how to not act. I'm a very much so, and I think it has to do with the way that I grew up and certain things that happened in my childhood. I'm a problem solver. I see something, I fix it. I think that's probably the reason why I do the work that I do now. And so I got on the call with the founder of Beam, and I kind of let him know what happened. And, he said, hey, anything you need, I can support the family if they need therapy services or whatever have you. I later found out that I knew the husband. My mom knows the husband, and just realizing just how, connected we were and are to the family, and just realizing how something like this could happen to any of us, and I think about the father, and I think about, this is still his son. How the heck do you heal from this? I have no clue. And so we're probably gonna end up doing some kind of fundraiser during the event to help to support the family, the Joseph family. Yeah.
Well, before we give people information about your website, etc., you got an award recently from the mayor.
Oh, was that recently?
Well,
So many, you can't count, right?
I probably did get acknowledged.
say which one.
I mean, I think I don't even remember. I'm telling you, I'm just so focused on doing the work, honestly and truthfully. I mean...
Well, you said you're very grateful. You said every day you're grateful for the fact that you had community that shored you up.
Oh,
You
yeah.
were close to suicide yourself a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, 100%. I mean, even to this day, I wake up with gratitude. And my sister will laugh at me because I'm like, oh my goodness, look at these flowers. They're so pretty. Oh, I'm so grateful for, and she'll just be like, you're weird. And I'm like, I could not be here. You know what I mean? My life is so full right now, I can actually say I love my life, and I can never really truly say that. I might have said it, but I didn't really mean it. I can really say that I love my life, I love the work that I do. It's brought so much meaning to me. And so what matters to me the most is when people say oh, I was able to use your website and connect with somebody, or oh, I went to one of your events and I felt impacted. Those are the things that I'll remember and will keep me going, or deposits in my account to push me forward. I guess the awards are good too.
I think you put it in perspective. Okay, well, I'd like to thank you both. I'm sure people can come up afterwards and chat to you if they need details about your walk in Milton. Sounds fabulous in Blue Hills. Thank you, Paris. Thank you, Naisha. That was very, very warm and wonderful. Thank you. I'll hand it back to the maestro. Super organised, the whole thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We have the space for about another half an hour, so if we would like to go back into the reception room and have more coffee and talk to Paris and Aisha and Mary, Billy is saying one more thing. Yes.
And Regina has been nice enough to offer tours of this facility because there are other rooms.
Great. So yes, there are tours. So we can stay for a tour, for more coffee. And Mary, thank you so much for hosting and helping us, and Paris for being here. We look forward to more time on GBH. And Aisha, we wish you all the best with your work. Really inspiring, and I'm sure you are seen, and you are heard, and you are loved. So thank you all for being here, and thank all of you for coming.
Very drawn to be here, and now I know why. And I've heard across the street in a church and at the Baptist church, and I'm just really hoping it's still there. Oh, we shall see. It really is.
I cannot tell this. You just made my day. So good. So Peggy. Peggy's always a delight. You're just such an inspiration. Thank you for your support. All your kind words mean so much.
Everybody knows. Next year, and I'm yeah, they're in the
So Rachel is It's so hot.
It's funny, they opened up that wine
In my old nomad. In my old space.
It's a wine bar.
I know. It is. It's a wine bar with yeah, all
It's from
yeah. And
everybody's into bars.
and little bites. You order little bites, a lot of seafood.
I'm so happy to introduce myself. I'm Alice, but I'm so happy you had Princeton University. I think very maybe some take us to.
I know.
It was absolutely it was fun. But if you don't see